Greetings to you, Crocoduck Army. What's happening? So, I see there was at least one person in here, at least a few minutes ago, and I know I didn't give very much lead time, as I often don't, because I just feel like doing a stream, and here we are. So, let's see. Mr. Autopants says, I see Zon has been canceled because he's on YouTube saying whatever he wants to say, just like all the other people who were canceled. Yeah, pretty much. That's about how this thing works with the whole canceling thing. I hear a lot of things, even among my friends. They're like, "Oh, it's cancel culture or whatever." Um, yeah, I don't honestly see a lot of that happening. It's there's quite a lot of there's quite a lot made of like, oh, the people who are canceled are mostly conservatives, but then you look at what they actually say. It's not like what they're saying is something like, oh, well, I think we should tax the rich less or something like that. I mean, that's basically a conservative take, or at least there are a fair number of conservatives who think that. Or like we need to be stricter against illegal immigration or something like that, and or we have to be against abortion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Any number of those things are perfectly fine, and of course, conservatives say all those things, and they don't get canceled or fired or whatever it is, that they think that they is happening to them. So clearly, it's a little bit selective on their part how that actually happens. Um, it's definitely not one of those things where it's like, oh, you're instantly canceled for having a political view. You're basically your company that you work for is getting backlash for having some sort of really abhorrent view on something blatantly racist or blatantly whatever. Um, and so it's not usually the kind of thing like, oh, it's a gray area, or like, oh, they're just saying this and this that like lots of people believe. It's not usually the case. I mean, granted, I think there are some companies and there's some situations where they are quicker to pull the trigger than maybe they should be. That's something that happens a lot. That happens. I'm not even sure if that's a lot. Happens occasionally. Occasionally, there are companies that probably don't get the full story before they figure out, what they're going to do about a certain situation, and they probably are too hasty in some cases. But I would say that most cases that I've seen, it's been relatively cut and dried. Um, this whole Gina Carano thing, that's been the latest example of someone that they said has been canceled or whatever. But you see like the bizarre memes that she posts and stuff, and like the Holocaust one where she's talking about like, oh, being mean to Trumpers is basically the same thing as like at the beginning of the Holocaust, and that's like kind of a cringy take at best. So yeah, I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for her. Certainly, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but on the other hand, that's not the only thing that she said either. I've seen a lot of. She's also posted some of these weird memes that are vaguely, New World Order type of stuff, kind of along the George Soros kind of dog whistle kind of take, which is not usually a good look either. So, yeah, I would say yes, that is true. I am a cat man, not to be confused with a cat boy or something. So yeah, the it's actually Mrs. Zonstar that is a huge cat person, and I'm a cat person as well. But I grew up as a dog person and a cat person. But she definitely is much more a cat person, and since we live in a townhouse, so it's not like we have unlimited space, but it is just us, so we have plenty of space. Like if we wanted a dog, we could certainly get one, but it's just dogs are more work. So yeah. Oh, you have a Chihuahua too. Do the cats beat up the Chihuahua? I usually find that like if there's a situation where you've got dogs, if you got like really small dogs and cats, it's usually the cats that bully the dogs as opposed to the other way around. the, The dogs are usually skittish around the cats, but they get along. Oh, okay, they grew up together. Yeah, that probably helps, I would assume. So, yeah. So, how are you folks doing? Anyone else out there besides Mr. Autopants and Jim John Haywire? I see there's some people filtering in. What do you want to talk about? Let's talk about some things. Things have happened. The last time I did a stream was the day that they announced that Biden was going to be the next president of the United States, and now he already is president, and he's been president for like almost 4 weeks, and yet we don't have socialism yet. What's up with that? That's another pet peeve that I want to talk about as well. Like I take these things with a little bit of a grain of salt, because I understand, like, some of these people are really good friends of mine, and I understand at least to some extent their thinking, but the bully Biden thing, which I fully am 100% on board with, telling him, like, anytime that Biden does something that is not something that he said he would do, I think that's a very good thing to make sure that he is held accountable. However, there are some things, like this whole thing about the $2,000 check versus the $1,400 check, that I think are silly. There were so I see some of my lefty friends posting these memes about, like, oh, $2,000 checks means $2,000 checks, even though they said $2,000 checks before the $600 checks were out, and so it's $1,400. It's going to be hard enough to get $1,400 because of Manchin and maybe Sinema, I don't know, on the Democrat side, just to get that through Congress, even using the legislative tool of reconciliation. So trying to force a $2,000 check, I mean, just, you got to understand how much power you have. Yes, if Democrats had done better in the Senate in the election, if Cal Cunningham had won, for instance, in North Carolina, or if Sarah Gideon had won in Maine instead of Susan Collins for the millionth time, a blue state in which they voted quite comfortably for Biden, that would have made the difference, and we would have already had what we need in terms of having plenty of votes to make sure that the 1,400 even went through. But you got to understand how close it is, and we have to have everybody on board. So SM Rot says, you've been popping in and out of Paul's and TJ's stream. Yes, that is true. I will jump into Paul's stream here and there. The thing is, and I enjoy going into TJ's stream as well. I've been in TJ's streams less because he streams all the time, like when I'm working, like during my work day. And obviously I got stuff to do most of the time, so I can't usually jump on. But but yeah, I was in one of TJ's streams last week, and had a good time hanging out, chatting with TJ and others. So let's talk about Paul's ego and his failed anti-electoralism theory. Just kidding, I love the guy. Well, and Jim, I sort of agree with both points. I mean, Paul's a fantastic person, and I consider him a friend, though I have not actually met him in person. Really interesting guy. I like a lot of his takes on things. We're both certainly left of center, but we have very significant disagreements about what the tactics might be in order to move the world to the left. And I don't know what I don't always know where we can even bridge that gap. I think we're pretty far apart on some things, especially when it comes to electoralism. I don't see electoralism and direct action as at all in conflict. I mean, yes, you always do both. Not just sometimes, always do both. And his take is very different on electoralism. Like, you engage in it only up until the time where you say, well, this person's too far from my values, and even if these are the two choices, I'm not going to pick either one. I mean, I don't want to say Bernie or bust, because it's much more complicated than that, but that's the kernel of that thought, is it's that type of thinking, which I don't subscribe to at all. I don't think that's how we're gonna get there at all. I think that it's one of those things you've got the train going a certain direction, and even if you know that you're gonna stop before they will, it's kind of like I want everybody to be on board that train, because right now we're nowhere near where we want to be. And I'm sure Paul and any of my other more lefty friends would agree with that. So it's a matter of getting on that train and heading in that direction. But if we don't get in that direction, that train that is going to the right all the way to basically to fascism at this point is going to carry more weight, and it's going to beat the train that's going left. So we have to stay together to some extent. And I could understand splitting off if we were already, far enough to the left where it was like, okay, well, now we have to, force the issue to give in for like, even then I would be like, well, do we want to go back to the right, or do we want to just go maybe a little bit more left of where I'd want to go? And even in that case, I'd say, well, yeah, going a little bit more left would be better, even if it's a bit farther than I would go. So, yeah, and but in terms of him personally, I think he's great. I mean, I think sometimes he's more bombastic in general than I am anyway, but that's fine. That doesn't bother me. I mean, we've gone 10 rounds over various things here and there, and that's totally cool. It doesn't bother me. I've been arguing on the internet long enough for that to not bother me, especially with someone who certainly is a friend. So, yeah. So Mr. Autopan says, I can tell that Zahn is canceled because the way I always know if someone is canceled if they're out in public saying nobody hears them now because they're being canceled. Well, yeah, that's sort of like you said before. It's like you got Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson and every other right-wing luminary saying that they're canceled. Kind of silly. I have friends on Facebook, conservative friends on Facebook who are actually who get upset because they feel like if they say something wrong, they're going to get canceled because they're listening to Ben Shapiro and they're listening to all these people telling them, look out, you're going to get canceled, even though that's often not true at all. So, yeah, that certainly happens. Ed Butowski, what's happening, my friend? So, do you think New York will charge Trump with bank and insurance fraud? And if so, when? I certainly hope so. If it's something that he's guilty of, which would not surprise me at all, then yes, I hope they do charge him with it. Obviously, if it's not true, then it does nobody any good to trump up any charges. See what I did there? Yeah. So, but if there's something really to that, then yeah, absolutely, you should be charged for it. The Trump Foundation in general has done a lot of shady stuff over the years that I think is going to get investigated for sure. So I think Paul's heart is in the right place. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Paul's heart's always been in the right place. And having someone like him who is advocating really hard to push us toward a better society is great. A lot of what he talks about are things like class solidarity, that kind of thing. Those are valuable concepts, and something that honestly was, of course, something that I know, but hadn't been as much on my radar until he started talking about it more. And that talking about class solidarity and just workers getting a better shake by organizing and getting together and saying, hey, we're going to do something to make our lot better. Those are all important things, and I think those are very, very, very much worthwhile. So I'm glad he's doing it. I wish that he were less in that sort of burn your bust mold when it comes to electoralism. And I do think he's overly dismissive of electoralism and what it can do. I mean, think if people in Georgia listened to him about that, would it have been different? Who knows? So, yeah, he does want a national labor movement, and that's great. I think that would be a net positive for sure. There are a lot of states, and even through the federal government level, that have been very hostile to workers organizing, and but they have not been hostile to businesses organizing or having basically having any sort of legislation that's going to result in businesses getting more money going to the top, right? So, Ed says, what's your opinion of some Republicans wanting to start a new party? Fantastic. Godspeed, ladies and gentlemen. Do it. Start a patriot party. I think Trump himself has already nixed that idea because he knows, of course, that would simply result in splitting the vote, and it would be hilarious if it happened, and that would be perfectly fine with me. Long gone are the days at this point where I'm like, well, the Republicans being a decent opposition or something like that is fine or whatever. No, I don't. Republicans just the party's dead to me. Not that I ever was one or ever voted for one, because too much of what they believe was just abhorrent. But it's gone way beyond that now, and now you've got a significant, like a majority of the party thinks the election was stolen from them. It's ludicrous, and it's hard to believe that we're here. But I called it. I had concerns back in 2017, just over a year ago, after the inauguration, when Trump said it was the biggest inauguration crowd that never been seen. And a bunch of Republicans were like, "Oh yeah, oh, it's definitely the biggest one we've ever seen." They were going along with it. I was like, this is a bigger cult of personality than I thought, and this is not a good idea. Not going to end well. So yeah, that is definitely a thing at this point. I don't care if Republicans just crash and burn as a party. It needs to be gone. So, Ed Boone sucks. Are you still in lockdown in your area? Define lockdown. Not really. I mean, we haven't really been in lockdown since like June-ish, July. I don't know, something like that. But yeah, there are limitations for sure. But in my state, something like 12% of the population has had at least one vaccination for COVID, has had at least one shot, I think. And there's some handful of percent or something have had both shots, plus or minus, which actually is not bad. For the country at large. I have quite a few friends who are teachers or nurses, that kind of thing. So a lot of them have already had their shots, and that's good. We'll continue. It's going to be a while. I don't work in either of those industries. I don't have to. I've worked from home for 13 years, so nothing. It'll be 14 years coming up this summer. None of this is new to me, and I'm going to be one of the last to get vaccinated, which is fine. I should be one of the last to get vaccinated, though I would love to get vaccinated so I can actually get out and travel, do the things I would normally do. So, yeah. Let's see. B Greenacre 42 says, I've been going through my modest library here at home and deciding to get updated versions of books I have that are in rough shape. Avon is by far the worst publisher of books I own. Let's see. Avon is by the... So, yeah, I don't know. Sure. Yes, getting updated versions of books are not a bad idea. Are you talking about like textbooks, I assume, that kind of thing? Yeah, a lot of people get those, of course, on Kindle, etc. now, but I don't actually own a Kindle. I don't typically read them in that format. I do a lot of my reading just online, and online on my computer, I should say, not on a Kindle. I don't like having a device for me. I just like to be able to read on the screen in front of me, like I am now. Let's see. SM Rotz says, but Paul doesn't know how to make a national labor movement happen. Well, he's got ideas. I mean, he was involved in the labor movement when he was a kid because his dad was in it, and I heard a lot of his stories about that. And they're pretty fascinating, by the way. I mean, Paul is one of those people who weaves a story better than literally almost anyone I know. He is very good at sort of giving you the picture, like setting the stage, talking about like what it was like, and yeah, it's fascinating. He was talking about scabs one time, like a factory was on strike, and the workers at a factory were on strike, and there was a scab that came to try to work that day, and the workers who were picketing were like blocking his way, and he kept like inching forward thinking he was going to get his car into there or whatever, but it never happened. It didn't. They're like, he didn't break the line that day or something like that. But it's interesting to hear about that. I'm not sure that Paul knows how to make it happen. I have not. I mean, to be honest, I don't know if I would know how to make it happen either. I'm pretty sure I couldn't. There's a lot of. I would be able to come up with some ideas, sure, but getting to that point where the public, the public idea about whether there should be a labor movement, and if there should, like what form it should take, that's a very tricky discussion. I'm not 100% sure how to spark that off, aside from making sure that there's legislation to make it easier to unionize and making certain areas more union friendly. A lot of that is at the state level, though. It's not all federal legislation. So we have to understand that a lot of this is different today from state to state, and any sort of labor push would need to start in the blue states more so than the red states, or at least the purple states, as they say. So, so Greenacre, why would you be replacing old books with new versions if it's mostly fiction? I mean, the fiction's not going to change, right? It's going to be the same story. Are you just doing it for aesthetic purposes so that it looks better? I don't know. Maybe I don't fully understand. So Lixtra says, do you think the original atheist skeptic community before the anti-SJW crowd was layered in had any lasting impacts? Do those same religious arguments ever need to be drudged up again? Yes, they do need to be dredged up again, because there are always new people who are leaving religion, and they need to be able to understand that all of these either resources or ideas or whatever else, all this stuff exists out there and is available for them. And there are a lot of people in that old movement that are still around, that still do content that's primarily around that kind of thing. Like the Thinking Atheist, the Friendly Atheist and his blogs and stuff, and various other things. There are various other people that are doing very good work along those lines. So I do think that there is still value in all of that. And so JM says, I haven't seen this guy in like 10 years, LOL. Do I look different 10 years later? So 10 years ago, I had just gotten started, actually. I wouldn't have been doing it for very long, unless you caught me right at the beginning of when I started to make more videos and that kind of thing. That certainly may have been the case. Yeah, it's been a while. I haven't made as many videos in the last few years. I've only made like, I think last year, like maybe a dozen. If that, something like that. And it's been months since I've made like one of my regular videos, like the 5-minute sort of scripted deals. I've done a few live streams like this. I admire people who are able to live stream like this all the time, and it does look interesting. But it is a lot of work, and I already have a challenging full-time job as it is. So it's not the kind of thing that I can really spend forever doing. But Ed Boone Sucks says, have you seen Bill Maher interview Adam Kinzinger? I have not. So Kinzinger is he's the congressman from Illinois, as I recall. So Kinzinger is actually sort of a never Trumper, and he actually does make very good points about, like, if Republicans had any spine, they would vote to convict, etc. And that's true. They should. They don't. They won't. And it really doesn't matter. He really could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and 80% of them wouldn't care. Like, the fact, I would have even said 95% of them wouldn't care, but there's maybe 20% that actually did get upset by the Capitol riot and actually do put that blame correctly on him. Maybe 20% to 25% of Republicans, but most of them still carry water for him. I mean, look at Kevin McCarthy. He went down to Florida to basically help Trump rehab his image. He had no reason that he had to do that, but he went down there and did that. And now, just yesterday, it comes out that Kevin McCarthy was on the phone with Trump trying to get him to get the protesters away from the Capitol, and Trump wouldn't do it. But yet McCarthy still is loyal to Trump. He could have been killed, and he's still loyal to Trump. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. So, but yeah, but Adam, I didn't see the interview, no, but I may catch that later. I have seen interviews with him. I'm sure he said some of the same things as I've seen on other networks as well. Lixter says, you still look quite youthful, same way I remember you without going back to old videos to make a direct comparison, LOL. I can definitely tell the difference. I definitely do not look like I did 10 years ago. But I don't look super different, but you know, I am 10 years older for sure. I'm still about the same weight, actually, so I try to keep in decent shape and try to not look too old. But you know, everybody ages. I try to be as healthy as possible, as reasonably possible anyway. I don't spend tons of time on it, but I try to exercise a few times a week at least, and all that, and not eat junk all the time. So Greenacre says, I have some books that are in terrible shape, bindings almost gone, pages falling out, ripped, getting new publications, so read them without pages falling. Yeah, I understand that. Makes sense. So yeah, those of you who are following COVID closely, or the numbers, like I follow the numbers pretty closely when it comes to new cases and deaths and all that kind of thing. And so I've seen that in the past 4 or 5 weeks or so, about 5 weeks or so, the numbers have been dropping every single week, which is great. The numbers are definitely leveling off. We're now getting to the point where I believe this week was the first week since like the last week of October that we had an average of less than 100,000 per week, or per day rather, less than 100,000 new cases per day. So I'm gonna put as I usually do every week. I'll put a map up, but I don't always put it on. I don't always put it on Twitter, but I do occasionally put it on Twitter, so you can follow me there. I don't say a lot on Twitter. It's mostly just sometimes responding to others, and sometimes I'll post something, but you won't get tons of Twitter spam from me if you do follow me there. But I do sometimes post my COVID maps there to show the difference between last week and this week, state by state. So it'll show, it's basically a heat map showing whether the cases are going down or whether the cases are going up from week to week. So, and we're definitely going down in cases, and I'm hoping to see that happen quickly, because then other countries will start saying, okay, it looks like the US has their COVID issue under control and will allow international travel. And that's something that's important to me. It's a big part of my life that has been missing now for the past year. I haven't been anywhere internationally since I was in Japan in January of last year. So yeah, I miss it. And hope to get back on the road again soon. And at least until once I get vaccinated, we can at least travel domestically until places that we're trying to go internationally open up. And Mrs. Onstar and I are planning on going to Southeast Asia on an organized tour group. We sometimes do organized tours where it's like, stuff's in, a lot of things are included and you're going with a group. And then other places will organize it ourselves. And so we do have a tour that we already signed up for 2 years, basically 2 years ago. That's going to be, well, it was about 1.5 years ago, I guess, that we signed up for, and it'll be happening in October, hopefully. So we'll see. Let's see. So worldometer constantly on refresh for me. Yeah, exactly. I look at it like, once or twice a day kind of thing. Like I look at it toward the end of the day when I know it's pretty close to the end, all the numbers in for that day. But yeah, I do like worldometer for that. Nish Brown says, you're the only person I missed since leaving Twitter. Make more videos, LOL. Thanks, Nish Brown. I appreciate that. I often say I'm going to make more videos. Sometimes I will make some for a while. I haven't made a ton, especially during the pandemic, even though I've had the time. It's not like I've been traveling. So, but I don't know. The pandemic has been rough. I'm a pretty outgoing person. So you'd think I probably should do more of these, but I don't know. It's like I'm sort of biding my time, just waiting for travel to open up again, that kind of thing. But yeah, I would like to do more as well. Lexter says, I kind of wonder if the vaccine has any impact on the drop in cases, or is also a combination with behavioral lockdown reasons. Well, a big part of the drop now is that we don't have holidays. We had the Thanksgiving spike, which was already going up when the Christmas spike hit, and it went even higher. And then you got New Year's. I'm still a little concerned about the Super Bowl from last weekend. I don't know to what extent that might bump the numbers up a little bit, or at least prevent them from going down further, because of people having Super Bowl parties. I did see a few friends had Super Bowl parties. I didn't think that was a great idea, but whatever, I guess. I do think that the vaccine, yeah, I can imagine at this point. I mean, something like 30 million plus people have had at least their first shot. That's a significant number, and I would expect that is. I mean, that's something over. I think something like 11%. I think it's just under 11% of Americans have had at least the first shot, and that's got to make some difference. So yeah, I would expect it's made some difference, but obviously even more once we get moving here. We actually had a few days this week during the week where we had less than 3,000 dead, which you'd think that would have been, we would have been lower than that for a long time, and we were for a long time, but because of the holiday spikes, people couldn't stop going to see their elderly relatives, and now a couple 100,000 of those people are dead. So I wish they weren't, and everybody told them. But so Ross Seville says, breaking news: Trump acquitted. So yes, that does suck, but true, not unexpected. So yeah, it definitely is what we expected. And greetings, Ross. What is happening, by the way? Nish Brown says, shit's rough, no worries. Yeah, definitely is. It is rough, but and sometimes like I'll think of a topic or something, and then I'll think, well, if I do it now, it's going to be like days before it's even out. I'll script it and whatever, and I don't know. I talk myself out of it somehow. But yeah, see what I can do. So only one to serve. Why Black and BAME not taking vaccine if they most affected? So because there is certainly a history of not trusting medicine, because there have been issues before with there are continuing issues with medicine and how minorities are treated when it comes to medicine. I agree with you that they definitely are the most affected. They certainly have the highest death rate. They definitely should be taking the vaccine, but that's not, it's going to be very difficult for me to make that case. But there are black doctors, and there are, Latina doctors who are also making that case to their communities, to those communities, I should say. So that is really good, but it is going to take a little bit of time. Historic, yeah. And so as Lickster says, yeah, historic mistrust of medicine due to things like Tuskegee experiments or whatever. Yeah, that was pretty bad, and yeah, not good at all. So, and Ross says, yes, make more vids. Speaking as one of your patrons, ready to pay for good quality content. Thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. Well, for those of you who have not gone to my Patreon, I haven't been making much content, so I haven't been, nobody pays anything if I don't make anything. So, but yes, I would, and I do when I do these streams, at least for now, I do put that on there when I make a video out of it. But I don't ever monetize more than one thing a week anyway. So if I do a stream and or a video or whatever, I would only monetize one of those things through Patreon. But yeah, the more I get at this. So with Patreon, for years I kind of resisted doing that, but then I got on Patreon thinking, well, if I do get enough people on Patreon, like, I would certainly make videos more often. But it just felt weird pushing it, because I'm like, it's not my career. It's never going to be my career. But that's not really the point. It's like, you're encouraging content creators that you like, and I do appreciate that. If you do want to go to Patreon and be a patron, then that is something I'd appreciate. And of course, like I said, you only pay if I'm actually doing something like this, talking to people. So, see you, Lextra. Appreciate you coming in. Okay, so only one to serve says BLM protests did magic, no COVID spread. Well, the BLM protests, not only was there, I mean, especially compared to, like, so let's compare, if you want to compare, like, protests, right? Compare the average protest to, like, the Capitol insurrection, right? There's that protest, and then there's the BLM protests. So BLM protests were almost entirely, were basically entirely outdoors. The Capitol insurrection, that started outdoors, but then ended up indoors. And also with BLM, there were more people wearing masks. And really, part of it is a matter of, like, well, which cause is actually worthy of taking that risk, or taking any risk? Is the cause of trying to violently overthrow democracy worth risk? I mean, no. I mean, that it would be the opposite. The people trying to stop that from happening, that would be worth risk. Worth risking injury or even death to actually maintain democracy, right? So it's night and day to me. But when it comes to BLM, yeah, in most cases there were a lot of people. Most people, I wouldn't say most, but definitely I would say a solid majority were masked, and at least those were outside entirely. So, all right. So, not trust medicine. Their life expectancy to double with modern medicine. Well, yeah, and so only one to serve it. It doesn't mean that they don't trust any medicine necessarily. It's just they don't necessarily trust that when medicine says, like, oh, you should take this for, as a vaccine or whatever. fair amount of anti-vaccine sentiment, that kind of thing. So Pigwig PA says, "Holy crap, you're still alive." Yes, that is true. I'm still alive. I'm not that old, am I? No, I'm still around. I just don't make as much content as, of course, as I used to. I mean, I used to make pretty reliably a video a week up until like 4 or 5 years ago. I guess about 5 years ago or so now, maybe even a little bit more. But yeah, for several years, I was making pretty much a video a week, and it was fun, and I still have fun with it when I do it. It's just feels like a different landscape. Like I was forged in the atheist YouTube landscape, and that was one thing. And then when things started changing, and like you had this whole alt-right thing, and unfortunately, I ended up with a fair number of people within the Crocoduck Army, which I didn't realize until I started talking about other things besides religion. I was like, I definitely have a fair number of right-wing reactionaries in my audience. Atheists though they were, there was definitely some reactionaries in my audience. Most of them showed themselves the door because I didn't, I don't block anybody. For people want to listen to my content, listen to me, then that's fine. I'm not gonna go. I'm not going to tell them to go away. I'm going to just tell them they're wrong, or just say what I believe. Doc O'Malley says, "What hyperbolic nonsense! Seriously, the most disingenuous representation of what it was. How can you expect people to take you seriously if you present that bad faith of representation to what people were protesting about?" So, Doc O'Malley, what were they protesting at the Capitol? I assume you're talking about the Capitol, right? I mean, that's so at the Capitol. Were they or were they not protesting the results of the election? Were they not going in and literally saying Trump told us to do this, and like trying to find Nancy Pelosi, trying to find AOC? So Doc O'Malley, what were the questionable situations surrounding the elections in terms of the results? When you look at the results and you see that Hillary won the election in terms of popular vote. We're just talking about the popular vote. Hillary beat Trump in the popular vote by about 1.9%. I believe it was in it was about, what was like 1.9, or no, 2.9%. I believe it was, yeah, in 2016, and Biden won by like 4.5%, right? So 2.6% more than what Hillary won it by. But in those three states, in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, each of those states were like, I think about 1% or maybe even less than 1% of difference, right? So it would stand to reason that if he won more votes in the more state, like that, if he won that much more percent, of course he's going to win by enough of a percent in enough states that he would win. And he even won enough more percent to win in Arizona and to win in Georgia as well. Now, if you look at the difference, if you see a map, I actually made a map of the difference. In fact, I think it's on my Twitter. I'm pretty sure I think I tweeted it like a couple weeks ago, and I don't tweet that many things. So if you just go to my home, my Twitter page, I think you'll see it pretty quickly. I tweeted a picture of each state, how much each state went toward Biden, and which state went how much more blue than last time. And you'll see a sea of blue, and not just in swing states. So Doc O'Malley, what I would expect, if what Trump said was correct, if what Trump and his fans said was correct, I would expect that that most states would either be the same or would be going toward Trump, but only the swing states would be going toward Biden. That's what I would expect, right? But that's not actually what happened. If you look at that map, you'll see that Nebraska, Kansas, Montana, Oklahoma, a bunch of those states, or those are some red states that went that went quite a bit left. There were several blue states that also went quite a bit left: Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, I think Rhode Island or Connecticut. There were a bunch of states across the board. Do you know how many states, Doc O'Malley, went for Trump more in 2020 than in 2016? That number was, I believe it was five. I want to say it was either 5 or 6 total states went more for Trump. And yet he expected to win the election. And that was supposedly fishy. I mean, was there voter fraud in Oklahoma? Massive voter fraud that enabled Biden to get several percent more than he got in 2016? Or in Nebraska, even more so, in Kansas? But he didn't win those states, but he did much better in those states. So it was all of the questionable events that happened in the swing states, counting going fine until the middle of the night when it stopped in the Biden. Jeez. But Doc O'Malley, I mean, I don't have to. Do I have to? I mean, but you know why this is, right? I mean, it seems like I feel like this is months late. I mean, everybody said even months before the election, Doc O'Malley, that this was going to happen, right? And that there was going to be a lot of mail-in vote, and it wasn't going to be counted until after the election. And in some states, like Pennsylvania, it was done in such a way that the vote couldn't be counted until later. And there were some states where the vote was counted immediately, like Ohio. In Ohio, the mail-in vote was counted immediately, and that vote went for Biden, but he didn't end up winning the state because of the same-day vote. It was much more Republican, but in Pennsylvania it was the opposite. And Pennsylvania was a lot closer, and really ultimately, even in Pennsylvania, I think his margin was like 1.5%, which is not big, but it's even beyond recount territory. I mean, he could have gotten hundreds of thousands less and still won in Pennsylvania. So it wasn't like it wasn't that crazy. The number argument is irrelevant if the method in which they are counted and verified is in question. Well, they did have observers. They did have actual observers in those places. People would not have protested if Trump had lost and there was not a slew of events that made people think there was fishiness going on. Well, yeah, I mean, Doc O'Malley, conservative thought leaders put out tons and tons of videos and conjecture and just outright lies, like, you know, the whole Dominion voting thing being owned by Hugo Chavez or something. Like, I mean, we're talking about Hugo Chavez, and he's been dead for how freaking long? It's ridiculous. So yeah, there were a lot of videos that they were saying, well, this is what this video shows, and like everybody could see the video, and yeah, the video was real, but it didn't show what they purported to be showing. There were many cases of this. So these objections were the reason for the protest, not to overturn democracy. Well, yeah, I mean, if you believe what Trump is selling, then yeah, that would be an actual thing to go protest. I mean, not to go try to kill Congress people, but if there were five people were dead because of these conspiracies, and they've telegraphed this from the very beginning. Because Doc O'Malley, Trump said for months, he said for months and months and months, he said if I lose, it was rigged. He planted that seed in everyone's head on the right for months, and it worked to an extent. I mean, he got a lot of people to believe it. So yeah, they believed what Trump was saying. They wanted justice. They, of course, yes, that's what they wanted. But they saw it as being this righteous fight because they had been lied to, and they believed it because there were some just hugely irresponsible people that were that had their ear. So. Yeah, so Sidney James says, you guys spent years saying the Russians rigged the election. So I point this, that's interesting that you say that. Do you remember, Sidney, when Hillary conceded the election? It was the very next day. Hillary conceded that election the next day. Yes, there were people saying that the election definitely could have been swayed by the Russians. And the Russians certainly did try to sway the election. I don't know whether what they did was enough to swing the election, but the margins were very, very close. So it wouldn't have taken much, and it wouldn't surprise me if it did. But Hillary didn't tell her supporters to storm the Capitol. Hillary did concede the election the day after the election. There were some people who were still trying to say that, like, oh, it was bad, whatever. But that's not actually how it went down in this case. So yeah, all this nuance, yet the same skeptic mindset framed the criminal George Floyd death as murder without trial. Well, it basically was. I mean, there wasn't a trial there, but everybody certainly saw what happened there. I mean, you just can't put your knee on somebody's neck for 9 minutes and definitely expect them to survive. And there are a lot of right-wing reactionaries that sort of see the George Floyd thing as like being in a silo somewhere. Like, that's never happened in other cases before. Like Eric Garner and various other cases where they've got those choke holds and various other holds that restrict the airway, or that compress the chest. Like the guy that was on Spectrum, whatever, that he was stopped, and the guy that played the violin, who was a young guy, just the nicest person, but they stopped him, and because he was on Spectrum, like, he didn't know how to react, and yeah, he died. And he's not the least bit. So George Floyd was a loser, drug addict, and died from overdose, not the knee. Know the facts. Well, yeah, I mean, that's what right wingers tell us, is that he died from an overdose, but that's not true at all. I mean, I know that's what a lot of right wingers say, but it isn't true. I mean, yes, he was on fentanyl at the time, and they said, well, that was enough fentanyl to kill a horse or something like that. Well, yeah, he was an addict. So as an addict, you do get tolerance for these drugs. So yeah, don't resist arrest, guys. Bad things happen. That's like, yeah, that's the meme, right? So, and so, like, what was Breonna Taylor doing? What was Tamir Rice doing? What was John Crawford III doing? I mean, even if you were to chip away at, like, well, some of these cases were this or that or the other, and it's also not even all about deaths either. I mean, people see deaths as being the major thing that they were up against there, and to some extent, yeah, there was a lot of it that was deaths, but there's also a ton of it that's like over policing in various neighborhoods and stuff like that. So anyway, I'm going to let's see. I'm going to be out for now, but this has been fun, and yeah, let's do more of this. And the more of this that we do, and the more of you that are on Patreon, the more I will feel the urge to do these 1 hour conversations with you guys, and or make more regular videos, and we'll see what happens. Good to see everyone, and good to see everyone in the Crocoduck Army, and I'll see you guys soon.